next up, we will talk about European level certifications. We will have Kirsten Bock from the European Privacy Seal. She founded the European Privacy Seal and is currently the head of it, and is leading, is also senior consultant, at the Foundation for Federal Government for Data Protection, Stiftung Datenschutz, in Germany. She has led the way on multiple GDPR certifications and is an international expert in European data protection law. And she will now tell us how to actually get certified with the EU Privacy Seal for a use in marketing and PR, and how this GDPR certifications are actually a crucial element in marketing, how this can create consumer trust, and also you will also learn about the key criteria to get a certification. And with that, I welcome Kirsten Bock on stage.
Thank you. Oops. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and to talk to you about certification. Well, after 5 years of the EU GDPR being in force, it's well about time to have certification mechanisms and schemes in place. But it is a very sophisticated procedure, and so the Data Protection Authority, sometimes together with the national accreditation boards, had to take some time in order to get ready. So let me check if this works out well. Well, so before long now, we are on the verge of actually getting started. Certification schemes and criteria will be on the market. The first have already been approved by the European Data Protection Board. And that brings us to the question, are you ready to create customer trust? Are you ready to get certified? Well, with certification, there are a lot of questions. Who can apply for certification, for example? What can be certified? When should I start the process? And where do I find a certification body? And how, what are the processes to actually get certified? Well, the GDPR does not certify an entity, a body, a company, for example. But it certifies, or it allows certification to controllers and processors of processing operations. So no manufacturers, no products, but processing operations. You can start this process and think about certification if you have documentation ready. Documentation is necessary to get evaluated, because evaluation is the process of getting a certificate, being certified. And you have to approach an accredited certification body. That is really of importance, because today there are many bodies around to promote certification, but which are often not accredited by either the national accreditation body or a DPA. That depends on the country, the member state you are in. There are slight differences here. For example, in Germany, it's the accreditation body DAX together with the state DPO who accredits certification bodies. And these accredited certification bodies are the ones who are actually allowed to issue certificates. Well, we've talked a little bit about data ownership, but here in the GDPR, the question is whether you are a controller or a processor. If you are, and therefore can apply for certification. You are a controller if you determine the purposes and the means of the processing of personal data. That means you are the one either to address another company to process data on behalf, but you are the one who actually decides well, now this kind of data is going to be processed within my business processes. The other option to have a processing certified is to be a processor, and you are a processor if you process personal data on behalf of somebody, of another entity. Well, this is the basic starting point from which you can move on and think about the different schemes that are emerging on the markets right now, because the process of getting accredited is in process, and you have different options, as you can see here. It depends on whether you are a controller or a processor. You have the opportunity to choose between national schemes and EU-wide schemes, and you have the opportunity to choose a certification measure for international transfers. These schemes can have different approaches as to their criteria that they are using in order to evaluate your processing. They can be either general or they can be specific. General schemes are, of course, applicable to many kinds of processings, whereas specific schemes focus on a specific scope. That can be, for example, smart meters or safe salary statements, so a very specific kind or type of processing operation. So in order to take the right decision on which scheme to choose, you have to think about which kind of processing in my company do I want to get certified. And in order to take this decision, you need to think about the so-called target of evaluation. This is a term used in certification which describes the thing that is being certified, the target. When you choose the processing that you wish to have certified, it is very important to determine it precisely, to find something that is meaningful to you and to your customers. You have to think of whether you want to address businesses. For example, if you are a processor, you are offering your services to other businesses, this is very important. Or you have to think about the area in which you want to use the certification. In order to determine the TOE, it is very helpful to bring together the different teams in your companies. It's not just a task or a topic for the marketing department, even though maybe you want to use the certificate as a marketing tool. It is important to bring together the marketing plus the legal, plus the IT people who actually know what is happening in your processes, what you are actually doing. So do a workshop and try to determine what is the best way to shape this target of evaluation. You have to think about what shall be in the target of evaluation and what should be out. This is very important because you can only get certified what you know of. So you need to know exactly where your process shall start and where it ends. And this also includes and now I'm always missing this this word, the interfaces. Well, once you have determined the target of evaluation, you need to choose and select the right certification body. As I said, these are at this time already emerging, but there are only very few on the market. So this also why I'm not proposing to you any of the schemes. I come from an independent body, so please excuse that I cannot tell you any names right now, but there are some first movers. But regardless, it is very important when you choose that you choose the right one, because there are companies on the market offering a data protection certification that are not accredited, who do not have approved EDPB approved criteria. And if you choose such a system, then you would actually waste your money, because these kind of certifications are not acknowledged by the GDPR. And in fact, the GDPR only allows a scheme to be called data protection certification if the scheme owner is accredited and or the certification body is accredited, and the scheme, the criteria are approved by the data protection authorities. So this is very important to take this into account and to look for this kind of approval. Then, of course, it is extremely important to find an evaluator, a certification body who has extensive knowledge in data protection. If you choose a body that does not have this long experience, this can lead to more effort for you, to more money to spend on the certification. So look out for bodies that have this kind of specific experience. Another important factor is, does the scheme has its processes and its criteria published transparent to you? If you go to a website and you cannot find the criteria, if you cannot find a clear, easy to understand procedure, then maybe you should move on and find somebody else. So, and because if only transparent procedures and clear and public criteria are the arbiters of trust. So if you want to use a certification as a trust arbiter to make your customers trust your processing operations, then of course the third party who certifies you needs to have this trust too. Well, as I said, and to repeat it because it is so very important, look for approved criteria, look for an accredited data protection authority if you choose certification body. Well, this already brings me to the end, actually, and to the takeaways. I will be very happy to answer your questions later on. I know these comments have been very generic, but as the market is only emerging, I think it is important for you in the future to have some criteria at hand at what to look at in order to find the right scheme and the right certification body. When you go through this process, again, do not go for the easy, quick way. Certification should be thorough. It should actually be worth the money, and that means that a general certification lasts at least 3 months. You should rather expect half a year or even more, depending on the sophistication of your processing operations. The certificates, and this is also based on the GDPR, can be valid for a maximum of 3 years, and they are renewable under the same conditions. So if you choose your certification scheme, make sure that also the evaluation, the renewal of the certificate is provided for in an easily way. Another question that I'm often asked is what happens if I do not meet the criteria in the evaluation process? Well, the certification under GDPR is voluntary, so there are actually no no consequences when you fail the process, but of course you should take this as a sign to work on your processes, because of course you want to be compliant, and as certification is a compliance instrument, this indicates a serious problem that you should tackle. Costs depend on the complexity, usually. Of course, the effort spent in order to evaluate the processing operations, the bigger your target of evaluation, obviously, the larger the costs. It also sometimes depends on the certification body. The more or the greater the trust arbiter, because maybe the certification body is well known, then often the costs are higher as compared to an entity that is not so well known. If you have your documentation ready, and this is really the key part, then the efforts will be quite low. If you do not have your documentation ready, or find out that you do not have your documentation ready, then of course you will spend more time. But as I said, you should look for a scheme that has its criteria published, and by that you can already check to some extent whether you will be able to fulfill the requirements that are set out, and therefore you can actually also approximate, the efforts and the costs that it will take to get certified. Certification schemes that offer certification for lump sum are usually not as thorough, and the consequences, or your takeaway, is of less value, because at the end of the process you should really be able to prove that your processing is in line with the GDPR. This is the requirement as a controller, as of Article 5, to be able to show, to demonstrate that you are processing in compliance with the GDPR. And a certification should always put you in a position to easily prove to a supervisory authority or your customers that you're compliant. And a good scheme also offers you reports about the evaluation and the results of the evaluation, and it should do that ideally in two forms. One that is more extensive and that is provided to you, that is not owned by the certification body. Some certification body own their reports. You should look for a scheme that that provides you with the reports and that you own after the certification, also the reports, and extensive reports providing all details, but also a public report, a report that can be published in order for you to provide to your customers in B2C cases. So this is quite important, and you will find many differences here in the market. You can, after the certification, if you fulfill that successfully, you will be able to use a mark or a seal in order to promote your processing, to show that you have completed the certification successfully. And you can use that, of course, in marketing, in your business context, but you should also be aware that you must always adhere to the seal message. If you acquire a seal, for example, for your processing for salary statements, for example, then you should refrain from stating that your company has been certified. Remember, the GDPR only looks at processing operations, and so you need to be very careful in marketing that you don't exaggerate, but you stick to the seal message. It is also noteworthy that certifications can be used when the unfortunate thing of a data breach, for example, happened, but by a certification you can also show that you have taken all the measures necessary in order to prevent such breaches. But of course, no process is perfect, so this can happen, and certification will always, not always, but needs to be taken into account when the fine by the supervisory authority is set. On the other side, there's also a rule in the GDPR that if you violate the regulations in Article 42 and 43, which regulate certification, or the certification contract that you have to sign with a certification body, then you are also subject to fines up to 10,000 euros or 2% of your annual worldwide turnover. So that's maybe a little bit the downside. So be aware when you market a seal, when you choose a seal, that you choose the right seal, the right message, fitting your processing operations. And if you do that, you can really benefit from certification. It can be a real trust arbiter. It can create a revenue that is really worth the effort and the price. You have the report to prove compliance towards customers and authorities, and you may even have a unique selling proposition as a factor to promote. And with that, I thank you. And if you have questions, maybe you ask them now or later. I'm available for your very specific questions as well. Thank you very much.
Hot up here, right?
It is really hot, and I can't see you, so this is really it's almost like remote. You know, you're sitting in front of a black screen.
It's good for the nervousness, at least for mine. Yeah, so we have a last slot today, which is pitches with a lot of questions. Still, I also want to give you the opportunity now, if you have questions for Kirsten Bock about the Privacy Seal certifications, to ask them now. I know it's late, right? I get it. Yeah, like Kirsten said, she is available, and you can also ask later. Then I have nothing left to say except for thank you.
Thank you.
And give it up for Kirsten.